Kia ora te whanaunga. Kia ora koutou katoa. Kia matua John, hei whakatūwhera o tātou hui i tēnei ata. E tautoko ngā mihi kia o tātou kingi, a kingi tūheitia, me te ata whai, me tā rawa whānau mokopuna, pai mārire kia rātou, huri no ki te haukainga, ki te whānau, o whanganui, me huri no ki ngā iwi o te motu, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa. Kia ora. Ko aihau, ko Donna Flavell o tōku ingoa, engari e noho ana hau ki ngā rua wahia. And my real job is, the CEO of Waikato-Tainui, and I masquerade as the chair of the iwi leaders in freshwater. I'm Waikato-Tainui as one small team member, I guess, if you like. There's 9 iwi that are actually represented on the iwi leaders freshwater kaupapa. And I'll just flick it over if this works. Technology, eh? So the Iwi Chairs Forum, and just a bit of context around what this group is, they're made up of around 70 iwi chairs currently around the motu. They're not there to usurp the mana or the authority of any other iwi. They are there just to, as a collective, working on key issues, on common issues for all of the iwi across the motu, and freshwater is one of those kaupapa. There's 4 kind of key areas: the Te Taiao, Te Tahua, Te Tangata and Te Tikanga. And there's a number of iwi that lead some of those po, and a number of work streams within those po. So the Freshwater Iwi Leaders Group is part of the Te Taiao Ropu, and they have to report back every quarter. Quarterly meetings are held throughout the motu, hosted by a number of the iwi, and the mandate is carried forward after you report back every meeting. So effectively, like I said, it's a number of iwi. There's 9 of us: Ngāti Kuri, Te Arawa, Whanganui, Ngāti Puro, Waikato-Tainui, Tūwhare Toa, Ngāti Kahununu, Ngaitahu, and Ngāti Tama ki Te Wai Pounamu. So those are the iwi that are involved on the freshwater kaupapa. And I see many of them in the room today. So for the mahi that we've been working on, so like as Pāhia mentioned, I've been on this kaupapa since 2004, and it's a long road, and it's a real complex issue, and it's a real hard one. It's hard because there's so many people in the water that's currently being managed by the Crown, and how it's managed. A lot of those permit holders are mostly Pākehā, industry, key stakeholders who've been able to use the water in a way to advance their interests effectively. So it is quite a complex issue in that sense. Politically, it's hard. The Crown don't want to cause any friction within the regions, and not only that, there's a diversity of issues. Like if you look at the Waikato River catchment alone, you look at the number of key stakeholders. There's about 5 to 6 iwi that are along its waterways. There's 33 point source discharge users, which means, there's a number of big users. And commercially, it's probably one of the most utilised river systems within the motu. So it's not an easy issue, and it's quite a complex one. But I guess over the years, just the small steps that have gained, and I guess my presentation today is to really give an update on where we're at. So there's 2 current priorities. One is around Te Mana o Te Wai, and the other one is around enabling access to water for iwi to be able to use it for economic purposes. Now the Crown's view has always been a real challenging one. They think that we're only always worried about the water's sustainability, which we are. The health and well-being of our waterways is critical, but that's not what we're only about. We want to be able to access water like everybody else, to be able to use it for economic use. And whether that might mean using it to develop your lands or some other purpose, that should be up to the iwi to determine what that looks like for themselves. So I guess that those are the two, and it looks quite competing in terms of, on the one hand, we want to look after our wai and our waterways, and then on the other hand, we want to be able to use it for economic purpose, you know. It looks like two competing, but I think if it's done in a sustainable way, if you look at it in a much more holistic way, if you do it in a sustainable way, you can have both hand in hand. So in terms of the Te Mana o Te Wai, there's been a number of progress that's been made over probably the last 3 to 5 years in particular. So we've had a number of engagement with the Crown around some of the policy and law reforms that have impacted on all of us in relation to our wai. The first one's really around the RMA. The other one is the National Policy Statement, so we've had quite a significant input into that. And if you look at the National Policy Statement, at a policy level, that's kind of, you know, the biggest policy document which can influence change at a regional level. And then you've got the National Objectives Framework, which is really around the science, so the geeky science stuff. So there's a few geeky scientists in this room, I can see a few of them, who have been working on this, and they're really good at it. They're really good at trying to get that balance around our mātauranga and putting that in a way that the Crown and the Pākehās understand it. And then the biggest one probably, and the most, you know, after all of these years, this is probably the most controversial issue around allocation, about accessing water for iwi to use. And that's probably, it feels like we're finally here to have some of these big and hard conversations that we've been waiting for so long to have that discussion with the Crown. So in relation, it's not a bill anymore, so aroha mai about that, but it is now law. In relation to the Resource Management Act amendments that we've just recently had, we've had this new concept, I guess, or mechanism that's been included in the reforms called mana whakahono. And basically, that's a tool which enables iwi to be able to engage with the regional councils and even local councils, all councils, on matters, resource management matters that affect each of our hapu and iwi. So it's not just for iwi, it's a hapu tool, it's a tool that hapu can use. And basically it wasn't made compulsory because I guess we didn't want to impose something on iwi who didn't really want to use it or utilise it for themselves, but it's triggered when the iwi want to be able to utilise this mechanism. All they have to do is have that conversation with the councils, and the councils must, it's compulsory, when the iwi want to trigger it, or when the hapu want to trigger this, then they must engage with the hapu and the iwi to determine how they want to be involved in the management of their waterways. So it's a massive change from just being consulted with. It's a massive change to our existing provisions. It's, you know, it's a major mechanism, I think, which can be utilised by everybody. I guess our challenge is making sure everyone knows what it's about and what the impact is, and how to best get the best outcomes that you can for each of the hapu and each of the iwi. Probably the other one in the reforms that I just wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about, well, that no one really knows, is that the Crown wanted to remove some of the provisions of Section 6, 7 and 8. And just to keep them in there was actually quite a big achievement for the team who've been working on this. You know, because those have been the catalyst, I guess, under the resource management legislation for us to be able to have a voice. And there's been so much law and case law that's been made throughout the country that enabled us to set those in concrete a little bit more, particularly around the treaty and having the treaty Waikato of Waitangi, aroha mai, recognised. In relation to the changes, there have been a number of changes within the legislation around getting that balance right between the economic and environmental, as well as, I guess one of the big achievements has been those alternative consent authorities. So the Crown put in a proposal about having an independent consent authority who authorised permits, who practically authorised all the consent, so removed it from council And I guess there's a number of things that are happening now, which is quite dangerous because, one, there's no relationship with a third party. So iwi would be pretty much on the sideline watching somebody else allocating water permits to anybody who applied for it first. So that was quite a significant issue. But not only that, I think what's been happening more generically, which we've all got to be very careful about, is that the Crown are using different mechanisms to bypass all of that, to actually put some of these big decision-making roles into third parties. We're just going through a process up in Waikato at the moment around a CCO, what they call a Crown-controlled organisation, and effectively it's a water care. So if anyone knows what water care does, they pretty much take water out of the Waikato, pipe it up to Auckland and charge people for it. And nothing goes back into our awa in terms of, any restoration or any improvements around the take. They just charge people and take from it. And so they were wanting to do a CCO within our region. And again, there's no relationship. It's considered to be an independent party. It's like a SOE. So effectively, there's no treaty relationship whatsoever because it's a third party. It's not Crown owned, so it's another guise for the Crown to be able to do things what they want to bypass any relationship with iwi. So these are all the things that are happening around the motu that we've got to, be alert. We've got to know what's going on because it's those types of things that are effectively would be taking away our interests and our rights in water without even knowing anything about it. One of the big mahi that we've got on at the moment too is just really going around the motu. So I just wanted to acknowledge some of our team who have been doing that. That's Tina Paro and Maria Nepia who have been doing a lot of that mahi, who've been travelling around the motu to hear our stories around our whānau, particularly around allocation. What do we want? What do we want to do? What do we want to do with water once we access it? How do we want our water to be managed? Is it a big, huge what we've done with the fishery settlement and allocate it out like a quota management system, or is it something completely different? These are all the types of questions that we've been trying to have with some of our whānau around the motu, and it's big issues. Are we willing to take a haircut like everybody else if we had to reset the system? The way that water's managed at the moment is probably we miss out. It doesn't work for iwi. It's a first in, first served basis, and basically we're not first in that line. So those are the types of issues that we've been taking around the country to try and pull together some consolidated views from an iwi perspective that we can engage with the Crown on. And like I said, everyone's got different issues. The way that we even talk about mana o Te Wai, Waikato uses mana o Te Awa, some people use mauri o Te Wai, but I guess more generically there's a range of principles that we can all come to agreement on, and I guess that's been the centre of our mahi going forward. So in terms of Te Mana o Te Wai itself, the clear priority has been able to access water for drinking. So a lot of our marae, and everyone in this room will know it, you'll know one of your marae who can't even access water, we've got to get it trucked in just to supply our communities, just to supply our marae for our kaupapa that we have there. So everyone who we've talked to around the motu, and that's more, at the moment more than 28 iwi I think, or 25 iwi, who said, the first right must go to the awa, or the river, or the waterways themselves. The other one, we must be able to access water just to have for our marae, because a lot of our marae don't get clean, safe drinking water to have. And particularly a lot of our whānau who are living in the rural areas are more hard done by. And I guess this is a slide, one of the photos we took up north, and it's just there in your face that people are, you getting water to sell it. And, the way that people treat water is, the way they treat it's just a commodity. It's not actually, there's no real care in how we utilise water. There's no sustainability measures. It's just use and abuse. And I guess this was just a picture we wanted to highlight up north, which just goes to show that. But our whānau, again, we want to be able to say, there needs to be more importance given to around, the value of water so that it's not just a commodity. How we do that, I think it's a change in attitude, but more importantly, it's probably a requirement there needs to be some kind of central government involvement to provide that direction in regions. So in terms of some of those hui that we've had, they want to be able to have a water allocation to revive our reset our waterways, having a much more better flows, better sustainable water limits that have been set to supply our drinking water for our marae, so we all have access to clean, safe drinking water, and also to be able to access water to develop our lands. I guess one of the big issues that we've been having at a technical level is, what about those iwi who have had taupatu, for example? Just because they might not have as much land available to utilise doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to access water. So one of the big challenges for us in this mahi has been really about, showing that bigger picture. Water isn't just attached to land in terms of its development for economic use, but it's a right to water itself. So that's been a real tricky conversation with the Crown in relation to some of those issues, because they can't get it past their head that you can't just access water as a right, you have to access water to be able to use it for something. So I guess that's been one of the hard conversations, is to change that dynamic and change their thinking around how they view water. And like I've already said, I guess for me is that, the first in, first serve, that's our current management framework. And if we want to make changes in terms of accessing water for allocation, for economic use, for iwi, then we have to change the way that the freshwater management framework. We have to disrupt what the existing system looks like for us to be able to do that, because it doesn't work as a whole. So I guess for us, when you look at Te Mana o Te Wai, it's in a more holistic sense. So the first is around the protection. The first right goes to our awa, as well as its ecosystem. So when we think about mana o te awa or mana o te wai, it's not just the water, it's actually everything that's in it. It's flora, it's fauna, it's metaphysical as well as its physical being. Because you don't go to the awa and whakarite yourself with the mud, because that's the Crown's view, right? You can only own the bed of the river. You actually use the water to be able to do that. So, it has to be looked at in its holistic sense. And then that will, once we get that right, in terms of the health and wellbeing of our awa, reset the limits and the flows, then everything else will enable us and sustain us. So, this allocation question, this is where the rubber hits the road, I guess, with some of the Crown's view. No one owns water, but yet they manage it as if they do own water. So that's the first assumption. So how do we get involved in the management of that so that we can actually own the water? One of the things that we're working on, there's not going to be no national treaty settlement. So again, it's working within the existing frameworks to be able to provide that right for iwi, but also preserving the position that if each of the iwi want to be able to go and negotiate their own settlements around water, then that's their right to be able to do that. I know, and I acknowledge our whanganui whānau for the innovative way of how they've been able to do te awa tupua. When we went through our river settlement for the Waikato, pretty much the same view in terms of the Crown. So we said, well, if that's your view, we want to be able to ensure that we're involved in every single step of how the Crown operates within its waterway, within the decision making of our waterways. And like I said, the first in, first serve, the RMA creates these bundle of rights, which are basically your resource consents. But some people, who once they have the consent, they think they can just use and abuse it. They've got no incentives to be able to change the way that they utilise and take water, take water and discharge water into our river systems. There needs to be some changes made to how those existing users are using the water. They need to be more responsible. They need to think about what they need to do individually in terms of the changes, as well as big corporates. Technology these days, there's so many developments. They need to be investing in better ways to operate their systems without using so much water. All of those types of things, those are the types of big conversations that need to be had. So, and I guess for us is how do we as iwi get a share of that? How do we get involved? How do we create room so that iwi have access to water to do what we want to do within Aotearoa? So those are the big questions. We haven't far from cracking that, but those are the questions that we want to be able to go around and have with our whānau, with all of you, within the regions, to have those hard conversations around how can it be done. But I guess to date, with all the hui that we have had, we've got what we call Ngā Matapono ki Te Wai, which was developed in 2012 at Hopopu with the iwi chairs. And basically that's been the tool that we've been using to advance our conversations with the Crown. And apologies, you can't really see it, but I could make sure I let Lisa know, and we can send an email out to you so you can access this information. But effectively, like I said, we need to reset the in-stream limits around the ecosystem and our waterways, and anything that's allocated over and above that, iwi should have a share. Iwi shouldn't be using its share to be sustaining our waterways. That should be a right for the river itself, as of right. Yeah, so I'll circulate these diagrams out to everybody. And it would be remiss of me not to take this opportunity to talk a little bit around the river settlement and some of the mechanisms that I've been talking about. We've also used or utilised. So I was lucky enough to be part of the team that supported Rai and Tiku, or Lady Raiha Mahuta and Tiku Roirangi Morgan. I was the lead. I led the technical team. Some of them are here today. And through the negotiations. And effectively, our two key principles was around mana o te awa and mana whakahaere, which is, really around the river of its holistic sense, and, our awa being a tupuna as well. We couldn't divide our awa up, so we had to think of a way to ensure that its holistic being was intact. And then the mana whakahaere was really around our people being able to be making the decisions for our waterways effectively. So if you think about the river, like I said, the Waikato River is probably one of the most economic utilised rivers in this country. It generates 1/3 of the country's electricity, probably could take up 50%. In terms of some of the major towns and cities, Hamilton right through from its source, Taupo, right through to the Puaha. There's some major towns and cities all using the waterways to discharge wastewater. We've also got probably, I think 80% of the biomass. So we've got massive issues around our fisheries. 80% of the biomass is koi. So we've got some major koi that come out of there, big, huge ones. And we talk to one of our whānau who's here, they get it mostly down there and at the port. But there's some massive issues within the Waikato. And so for us, we had to focus on the health and wellbeing of our waterways. So how do we do that in a more contemporary context around recognising that our awa is a tupuna, and our awa in its holistic sense is being managed in a way that we're happy with. So, we created an independent authority called the Waikato River Authority. It's made up of the Crown anyway, so 55 iwi that reside alongside the river, and 50% Crown, so 5 Crown. And we wanted the Crown to be there because they made the mess and they couldn't walk away from us. We wanted them to stay and help us clean up our awa. So normally in a settlement situation, the Crown just hands it over and says goodbye. For us, we wanted them to stay there and make sure that they can see all of the mess that they've made in our awa, and they can stay there and help put money into it and fixing it up. So the Crown are there for that purpose only. And then we have a Te Ture Whaimana, which is really our overarching policy document And that overarching policy document is basically, it's the rules. And it trumps any national policy statement. So if we set targets for our water levels, if we set targets within our river system, if the Crown and the national policy statement sets lower ones, then we trump that. So that's how our Te Ture Whai Manawa works. It's the vision and strategy for our Waikato River. And those are just a few of the tools to help give life to ensuring the health and well-being of our river is priority for us. So when the river authorities sit at the table and make decisions, they're sitting there for the voice of the awa. So they're not there to represent the Crown's view or represent our own individual views. They're there to represent what's in the best interest of the river. So that's their mandate, and they've got to work to that. In relation to the mana whakahaere, now this is really just our people. This is really around, when we think about what it's going to take to clean up our waterways, it's going to take an effort from everybody. So, one other thing around the River Authority is really the Clean-up Trust. So we've got $210 million that was negotiated through the River Settlement, invested just for clean-up. And basically, it's a contestable fund, and it's contestable to ensure that actually everyone who wants to be involved in cleaning up our awa can be involved. So it's not just for the iwi, because it's not just our responsibility to clean it up. We just make the rules, but everyone's going to be part and parcel of ensuring that they can participate and help with the restoration of our river as a whole. So when we talk about mana whakahaere, that's just the tribe doing its own things. And we've got Fisheries Regulations as part of that. We just developed some bylaws recently around our tuna, so we've worked with the commercial eelers around the take and setting minimum weight levels and maximum. They're not allowed prohibitions, so they can't take during certain seasons and closures. So all of those types of things are in our bylaws to ensure that we have control and say over our waterways in its whole sets, including our fisheries. So in terms, back to the iwi leaders and the Iwi Advisors Group, in terms of our freshwater, what are our next kind of things on the horizon, apart from this big question around allocation? We've got to work with councils because they don't actually understand what Te Mana or Te Wai is. So there's got to be a lot of work to educate councils and that, but also we've got to work with our iwi, with all of the iwi, so that everyone knows how to utilise some of these new tools that are coming through, particularly around mana whakahono arohi, if you so want to. It's an opportunity, it's a way to ensure you have a say. Some of those things would include fisheries, I would imagine, including where councils have responsibilities for. Those species, so it doesn't capture, I don't think it doesn't go as far as I'd like to in terms of capturing, say, Ministry of Fisheries or other agencies who have also responsibilities about different species of fish. But it's a stepping stone, I guess it's a starting point for us to have more of a say, particularly around our waterways. And also around capacity funding, so we've been engaging with the Crown that, to be able to, for our iwi to be able to participate, for councils to be able to understand us and work with us, they also need funding to be able to support them through that process. So you're seeing a lot more of a Crown fund coming out, but we want direct funding for iwi. So they've got all these new applicants where you can apply for funding, but I think it falls short of what we really need and what we really want, and that is about actually having direct funding from the Crown to be able to utilise a lot of these mechanisms that are coming through, that have been advocated through our iwi leaders. And I guess, like I said, I think around the allocation issues, like every region has different issues in relation to their waterways. So there isn't going to be one silver bullet that's going to have the answer. There has to be a range of tools and a range of mechanisms to allow iwi to be able to access water, because in our catchment, it's over-allocated, and we can't even get it to a place of it being health and well. Probably another 80 years is the predictions from our scientists. It's going to take 80 years for it to be just well. to be healthy and well. So, 80 years is a long time for us to be able to access water. So there needs to be a different way of doing things, and we need to be able to change the way that the Crown's managing their water systems before it is too late for iwi to be able to do what it needs to do in terms of our region. So it is no one silver bullet around this allocation. It has to be a range of tools and mechanisms so that it's flexible enough for each of the iwi to be able to pick that up and apply it within their own regions. So kia ora koutou, that's pretty much me. Kia ora. Questions?